Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where I break down the lessons we can learn, as GMs and as players, from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 83, The Deceiver's Stand. We're doing weekly Demystified videos, and we've picked a heck of a time to start doing that because these episodes of Critical Role are getting pretty intense. This is a big episode, so I'm not going to dawdle, we're just going to jump right into it. The party is in the lair of Raishan, the ancient green dragon, and they're just sneaking up on her as she is sitting in this arcane laboratory, taking the form of a woman and sitting at the desk and reading an ancient tome of magic. And as the party sneaks up on her, they roll absolutely terrible stealth rolls. And as the first party members approach the doorway, Raishan doesn't even turn around to look at them. She keeps flipping through her book, but she speaks to them. She tells them that they got here a lot faster than she expected. Then she says that she has work to do, and she just wants them to turn around and leave. She's functionally offering them a chance to stick to their original deal. Let me do my business and I'll leave you alone forever. Although she's pointedly not actually offering that right now. She's basically just saying, leave me alone. In this scene, I don't think she actually promises to leave them alone forever like she promised before, but of course that is the party's primary concern, is that she would come after them for revenge. She is uniquely situated for the most devastating revenge anyone could ever take, even more so than Hodis the Rakshasa. But additionally, as we discussed a couple of episodes ago, Raishan is too evil to allow to continue to live in this world. Even if the party could trust that Raishan would ignore them forever, which they do not, and she is not currently offering that, she's also proven that she is an evil supervillain, and she hasn't even unlocked the magic she's looking for yet. So, all that to say, they're not going to wind up taking her offer. The party starts to divide in the hallway, going around the column, but before they do, Pyke casts Beacon of Hope. This gives everybody advantage on wisdom saving throws, death saving throws, and you heal full healing whenever someone heals you. So a healing potion wouldn't do 2d4 plus 2, it would do 10. The max result of rolling those dice and adding that modifier. That's true for any healing you receive while this spell is active. Of course, it is a concentration spell, so if Pyke takes, I don't know, let's say nearly 100 points of damage later in this fight, that spell may not stick around forever. The party does not believe for a second that this woman they're seeing is actually Raishan. They know she's in the area, thanks to Vex's ability to detect dragons. They know she's here, but they think that maybe she's elsewhere in the room and they're talking to an illusion. She pulled that exact same trick in the Whitestone council meeting where Percy tried to attack her, and she had way more warning before this interaction with their terrible stealth check and the collapsing bodies from the bridge and all the other ways they worry they gave themselves away. And even when they ask her where she really is, she just ignores that question and just keeps talking to them from this desk where she's reading. And so the more she refuses to acknowledge that she might be an illusion, the more the tension of the scene builds. Matt is really good at that, allowing his villains to seem calm and using that to build the drama of the scene. But this calm demeanor and the fact that Raishan spoke with them rather than immediately attacking gives Keyleth the chance to step forward and speak with Raishan as equals. Probably in the hopes that this will give the rest of the party a chance to get to their strategic positions, while Keyleth keeps Raishan occupied. She asks the dragon if she found what she was looking for, and Raishan says she did. She found out what Thordak's original plan was before the soul anchor was embedded in his chest, before he went insane. He was looking for another way to extend his life and gain ultimate power, and he found it. That's why he was here, making his lair in the Dungeon of a Necromancer, and now Raishan has the ritual as well. While they're talking, the players put a lot of thought into their placement on the battlefield. Patrick wants to be as close to other people as possible because he has this paladin aura that extends from him. Percy walks on the wall so he's not as obvious a target as the rest of the party, so they're not clumping up. Vex brings out Trinket, Scanlan brings out the dog. The players are ready for shit to pop off.
You may also come to notice a curiosity about this island that explains a lot of the legends around it. Sadly, the pressures of time left me forgetting until I arrived, which has limited my options. I had only used the glyph once before, years ago, but it is as it is. So I ask you once again, we made a deal. You rescinded on that deal, and punishment was required. You survive only by my grace and your stubborn need to cling to your insignificant lives. Regardless, I have what I sought now, and I offer you this opportunity to leave freely. Decline, and you choose your resting place here, away from your loved ones, to be forgotten, and join the undying dregs of a long past madman's fancy.
Matt is so good at exposition. First of all, Matt is giving the players a chance to leave. He knows they won't take it, but this is such a fun way to characterize this character. She believes that their earlier fight in Thordak's lair was essentially punishment for breaking the deal, but she doesn't intend to live here full time. All she wants to do is get the knowledge she needs and leave. Maybe Matt is still hoping that she can disappear and come back in a future campaign, but I kind of doubt it at this point. I think that door is closed and he knows it, but he's still playing true to that character, whose original plan was to just take whatever she needed and leave. However, anytime Matt has a villain talk to the players instead of immediately killing them, or even talk to them during initiative while also trying to kill them, it's really important to ask, What new piece of information did we just get? Why did Matt have this character speak? What was he trying to tell the players? And in this case, it's something about how magic is weird on the island. We don't know what that means yet, but if these players manage to pull off what they're about to do and they don't die in a TPK, it's something they're going to have to figure out the answer to. And now Matt has foreshadowed it. Keyleth approaches and says she's learned a lot about herself from Raishan. She learned how selfish her quest for revenge was. And she has a new offer.
My want for revenge against you, while still strong and very palpable, I now understand is ultimately selfish. Only in the sense that everyone else in Tal'Dorei should share in the revelry of bringing you to justice. I am not the only one. We are not the only ones who have felt the ramifications of your destructive actions. And as much as I would love to make do on my promise that I told you weeks ago, and end your life right now, I desperately want the rest of Tal'Dorei to feel that satisfaction as well. So, you surrender now? You come with us under means of temporary control? We take you back to Iman? Maybe the Fire Ashari. We'll work that out where we're going to take you. And you face trial amongst the Tal'Dorei Council, the people of the Ashari, and on behalf of the rest of the citizens of Exandria.
They trade a few more barbs. There's some great comebacks in this scene. You should watch the full scene. Timecodes are on screen and in the description. But instead of lingering on any particular one-liners, I want to highlight how much Keyleth has grown as a character, and how much we can tell from this scene. Obviously, there's the surface-level growth that Keyleth is no longer obsessed with revenge. She realized that this was a harmful impulse that has been clouding her judgment ever since Raishan revealed herself to them back in episode 69. And this is the natural conclusion of a revenge storyline when it comes to a character arc. You realize that revenge is unhealthy and toxic, and if you don't, otherwise it's just a story about getting what you want. And that's not as dramatic. It's not as interesting. It's the reason Percy's storyline with the Briarwoods is so captivating. It ends with him essentially refusing to allow vengeance to corrupt him fully. But this is a very difficult thing to plan out in a story arc in a D&D game, because D&D is about going and killing monsters and bad guys. A third of the core rules is just a book with a bunch of things to murder in it. And so Matt planning out the storyline can't really steer Keyleth towards this resolution of realizing that revenge is the problem. It's something Marisha has to decide herself. Now, granted, it's a very logical lesson for her to learn after the brutal fight in episode 80, where she blamed herself, and specifically her quest for vengeance, for their loss in battle, their devastating failure to kill Raishan, and the death of her party members. But there was no way to plan this storyline to make sure that's what would have happened. So Marisha basically made a conscious choice to take that experience of what happened to them in episode 80, and the conversations they had about it in episode 81, and use that to evolve Keyleth and make her a better person. However, this kind of taps into something else I talked about when we were discussing episode 81, where it seemed like Keyleth was waiting for some sort of external prompt that would basically let her know she had become a wise leader like she was scared she wouldn't be. And Liam as Vax essentially gave her permission to just start thinking of herself that way. And so here, she has basically chosen to take in the lessons she's been given rather than continuing to play her character like a shrinking violet, waiting for external validation. That's true for her revenge storyline, but it's also true about her as a leader. When she says that they're going to bring Raishan back to stand trial, that is a fantastic moment of not just seeing Keyleth the adventurer, but actually seeing Keyleth the leader, because she's not here for her own selfish goals anymore. She's acting on behalf of the people. It's very obvious that selfishly she wants to kill Raishan right here in this dungeon. But I love that she acknowledges that this is a selfish act, and that it would deny the opportunity for the rest of the world to effectively get their own pound of flesh, to confront this dragon with her crimes and demand justice for them. It's not enough to simply kill Raishan and erase her from the world. What really should happen is she faces justice for what she did. And I can't help but chuckle at the fact that Matt was offering the players a deal that he knew they were not going to take. They were not going to let this ancient green dragon, who's also a 17th level spellcaster, and who just learned the secrets of an ancient forbidden necromancer, just walk out of this dungeon, or fly out of this dungeon. Likewise, Marisha probably doesn't think Raishan's going to acknowledge the authority of a bunch of people who are, in Raishan's own words, nothing more than ants. And I love any time the hero and the villain of a story express their desires, which perfectly align with their core ideologies. But these goals are not compatible, and so all that's left is war. Raishan says, luckily, her ritual requires some living, powerful spellcasters. So maybe it's fate that they're here. She can use some of the tools of this laboratory to keep them alive and docile once this fight is over. The twins cast Hunter's Mark on her, but they don't find purchase. Confirmed, the woman at the desk is an illusion, which they all knew. This is essentially what Matt tried to pull with the Hex spell when the party fought Ripley, and I like that he was just honest with them here. It does not find purchase on her. The spell is still active. They can move it onto a target when they actually have one, but right now it's just, they've cast the spell, but it's not attaching to anybody. And Matt asks what they're going to do next, but then I think he realizes, no, that was the problem with the last episode. Everyone wanted to do things all at once. So instead he has them roll initiative. Now, I will say, in the past, I have made the mistake of rolling initiative at the top of a combat of an ambush, where the players don't know there's going to be a fight, and so for that first round, until the bad guy acts, they don't know what to do. It's a very silly mistake that I made very early in my GM career. But in this case, the players do know what they're fighting, they just don't know where it is or how to find it. They know that Raishan is nearby, they just don't know where she is. Presumably invisible, but they don't know where. And that makes for a very different encounter, because now Matt can have them roll initiative, and they can try to suss out where she is, but they can still do it one at a time. So we're still getting all the tension of this search scene, plus the initiative of the players taking turns, so it doesn't become too chaotic. It's the best of both worlds. And of course, whenever we're in initiative, we just hit the highlights and summarize rather than going turn by turn and talking about everything everyone does. So here's what happens next. Vax and Percy shoot the 2 eggs and destroy them to make sure these baby dragons can't burst out and attack them and join the fight, or Raishan can't suck magic out of them or something. They know Matt very well. They know that they need to take care of anything else on the battlefield that could start generating more little monsters to add to the fight, or creating some sort of power source that will make the enemy more powerful. Gotta get rid of those. One of the baby dragons crawls partially out of the egg as Percy's shooting it, just for flavor, but then it dies as it emerges, just sort of hanging out of the eggshell. The illusion of Raishan stands up, bows, and vanishes, but the dog barks at something behind them, because that's the other reason Scanlan brought out the dog, because the dog can specifically see invisible things. He couldn't see anything before Scanlan asked, and he didn't see anything, which is a really nice benefit of the tunnel they're in. This is a good map, because the line of sight is going to be a real problem here. Half the party can't even see the other half of the party now. But now, the dog is barking, which means clearly there's something in this tunnel that was not there before. Scanlan blows his horn of fog, hoping it'll reveal invisible creatures, but unfortunately it really seems to limit visibility instead, which is a shame. Grog smashes the heads of the dead Thordak and the dead baby dragon, once again, to make sure Raishan can't use them for any other purposes, like bringing them to life and having them attack the party. This party has been burned a couple of times. Scanlan feels this warmth flow through him, and now they know what that means. His hero's feast has been dispelled. Grog's attacked by 2 wraiths that emerge from the cages against the walls, where there were other old dead bodies inside. Again, the party knows Matt. They were worried about these cages. They didn't get a chance to destroy them or see what was inside them before these ghosts emerged, but this was on their radar. Once again, also, Raishan is using somebody else's lair to their own advantage, and I think that is a really cool approach that really fits with this character. She is such a parasite that she will use whatever lair she enters, even if it was not designed for her. I feel like that retroactively also makes the fight in Thordak's lair work even better, because this is just something she does. She takes over somebody else's home and uses their security system against other intruders. Obviously, these ghosts are not literally lair actions, they're just additional enemies to enter the battlefield, so the weirdness of the last fight with the lair actions is gone in this case. But functionally, they are an environmental danger that is specific to this lair and its history as the domain and laboratory of a necromancer, and they're attacking whoever comes near the cages. But clearly, Raishan wasn't bothered by them at all in the time she's been here, so for the purposes of game mechanics, they act like they are her minions. Great design. Grog takes 41 damage, and with 2 failed Constitution saving throws, his hit point max is also reduced by 41. We talked about this in the Vin Diesel video that we just did. Funny how that worked out, coincidentally. It actually was a coincidence. I didn't remember that there were wraiths in this fight, but we talked about how these exact kind of enemies kind of waste their attacks when they focus them on the barbarian, because this would honestly be such a more devastating attack against the other party members. But unlike in that episode, in this case, it wasn't a conscious choice made by Matt to soften the attack on the players. It was just that Grog was the only one near the cages. He happened to be the first one there, so that's who they attacked. Also, the other reason those attacks didn't really matter in the Vin Diesel episode is because they weren't going to be healed at any point. They weren't going to take a short rest. They didn't have any potions. It didn't really matter for the length of the fight or the session overall. But in this case, they do have a Cleric. They have a max healing effect on them, and the rest of the party is distracted by other foes, so it is kind of going to matter whether Grog can heal up before these wraiths kill him, or if they can just finish off these wraiths before they get another chance to attack. Although, let's be fair, it would take a very, very long time for these wraiths to attack him enough times and for him to fail enough saves that his hit points would drop so far that he dies. It's conceivably possible, but Let's be honest, this worked out pretty luckily for the party. It's pretty unlikely. And additionally, it's especially unlikely because Cleric jumps into the fight. He was invisible thanks to the ring, but now he attacks, dumps a smite into the Wraith, and almost kills it single-handedly. It's barely still standing. And that's pretty impressive for a level 7 adventurer. And in fact, I just realized he is the lowest level party member we've seen on Critical Role to date of player characters, at least in the main campaign. I'm not counting one-shots. In the Vin Diesel episode, I said the party was level 8 when the live stream started, which is why they were level 8 in that one-shot that took place before the live stream, but that wasn't quite right. I looked it up, and they were actually level 9 in the Craghammer episode of the live stream. They were level 8 in the Vin Diesel one-shot because it was a prequel. And here, Cleric is level 7 because he was introduced as a retired adventurer, and Matt liked the idea that not everybody in the world would be the same level as everybody else. But that also makes him officially the lowest level player character we've seen in the Vox Machina campaign. Anyway, Vax kills one of the Wraiths. Pike then feels the Dispel magic flow through her, so she loses the effect of Hero's Feast. Keyleth casts Fairy Fire in the fog, which should reveal Raishan if she's in there. And she probably is in there because Keyleth gets counterspelled. That's very much part of Raishan's battle strategy, remaining invisible while attacking and casting spells. So she'll do whatever she can to maintain greater invisibility because it is her primary strategic advantage over the party. Vex uses her perception abilities to find Raishan in the fog, moves Hunter's Mark onto her, then hits her with an entangle arrow, and Raishan is, they can tell by the audio, grappled and restrained. She drops to the ground instead of flying. Percy hexes Raishan and gives her disadvantage on strength saves to make it harder for her to break free. There's a nice little combination there. However, she doesn't actually need to move to be dangerous because she casts a spell. And 4 portals appear on the ceiling, and 4 meteors slam down on the tunnel. And do you remember when we talked about the end of episode 79 and I talked about how using a meteor swarm on just the 3 half-elves was not the smartest tactical decision because if you can wait and deploy them on the entire party, you could hit a whole bunch of targets? I defended the choice on Matt's part because it was a really helpful way to deliver exposition to the party about what sort of spellcaster she was. I still maintain it was the right decision. But, you know, technically it wasn't the best use of the spell. But this is kind of the perfect time to cast it, because the radius of these 4 blasts hits everybody. Also, if you remember in the last episode, Matt blasted the party with 4 fireballs, tried to roll the damage separately, but then he lost track, so we just went with average damage for all 4 blasts, and I think that was the right decision. But what I didn't talk about was the fact that he essentially went person by person and let them know the damage. And that was very important because they were each making 4 saving throws, so going 1 person at a time was the only way to keep track of it. But also, I like that approach kind of a little bit more than what he normally does. Often what will happen is Matt just asks everyone to roll, asks for all their results, and then he says, okay, Grog, Percy, Vax, and Scanlan, you all take 20 damage. Keyleth and Vex, you take 40 damage. That's just a hypothetical example. That is not the damage for this meteor swarm. It does a lot more than 40 damage. But most times, this is how Matt tells players how much damage they take from something that hits multiple players at once. But with a party this size, it can be a little bit difficult to make sure you got everybody right. Plus, people don't know whether or not they succeeded or failed because they don't know the DC, so they basically have to ask a lot of follow-up questions based on their own rolls. Oh, hold on, you said those took 40 damage, but I took 20, but shouldn't I take the same damage as them because I rolled lower? And that's when Matt finds out he mixed up 2 players' rolls, so he just named the wrong characters to take full damage, and they clarify it. Again, he has a big group, it's not a huge deal. If you ask everyone to roll and you hear all their saving throws, and then you can say, okay, you 2 take 20 damage, you 2 take 40 damage, that's probably fine. But with a party this size, sometimes Matt struggles to get that right. And that's not the end of the world. This does not bother me as much as his system for collecting initiative scores bothers me, because whenever the party rolls a bunch of saving throws, his players can catch any discrepancies that happen in the moment. They're really good at checking his work when it comes to how much damage they're supposed to take, and because the turnaround is so fast, they catch it a lot faster and more reliably. Certainly at your table, if you can remember the numbers that your players give you when they all roll saving throws, and you can just tell them which players take full damage and which players take half damage, there would be no problem with this system. But I can't do that. It doesn't matter how big the party is or how small it is. I can never remember which players gave me which numbers. It just goes in one ear and out the other. Sometimes I'll just tell my players what the DC is so they can tell me if they succeeded or failed, and then I'll just tell them, anyone who succeeded, you take 20 damage, anyone else takes 40. But other times, I will actually do what Matt did in this episode and the previous episode, because what Matt does, as far as I can remember, only these 2 episodes and then hardly ever again in the history of Critical Role, is he goes to each player one at a time, they tell him what they rolled, and then he gives them the damage.
Scanlan.
8.
8. Okay, you suffer, that's 118 points of damage.
Remember, I'm immune to meteors.
Now, it doesn't really matter whether Matt ever does this again. The way he chooses to deliver damage normally seems to work for his party most of the time. I might argue that's a little bit less efficient than it could be just because it leads to more follow-up questions when he remembers someone's roll wrong, but I don't really think there's anything wrong with his usual system, especially if you bring it to your own table and you can keep track of the numbers. But the system he uses in this episode just works so much better for me, because not only is it more efficient for someone like me who can't retain the numbers another way, but it also, I think it's a little more dramatic. From the moment I first saw this episode, I have really enjoyed this approach to distributing damage to my players. With this method, I can just write down how much damage the attack takes, and I'm basically just asking my players to give me a number. I can tell them whether it's a pass-fail, and I give them the immediate consequence of that result. I don't have to retain any numbers. And this approach also helps handle players who have specific resistances, like Grog's bludgeoning damage and Pike's fire resistance, and Trinket, who's also immune to magical bludgeoning damage thanks to his armor. So when you get to that player, they can tell you their resistances, and you're not litigating it among all the other numbers that people are throwing at you. You're doing one player at a time. Again, for me, that's a lot more helpful. And again, when I say it helps, I only can speak to my own experience, but I will say maybe it'll help you as well. I encourage you to give this a try if you haven't done so before. If the party gets hit with like a fireball, try going one player at a time, asking for their result, and then just giving them the number. It is maybe not the best solution for you, but it works really well for me, and I attribute that entirely to this episode. Vax makes the save, and thanks to his evasion ability, he takes no damage. Lucky for him. The rest of the party doesn't fare quite so well. Basically, everyone loses concentration on all their spells because they took so much damage. Allura and Trinket and the dog are knocked unconscious. The dog gets pinballed around the hallway somewhere. Once again, when we have a discussion about magic items being indestructible, the precedence being set by something like this does play a role in that. I think this is a good example of why some of the players think magic items cannot be destroyed. I also think it's perfectly reasonable for your magic item to survive this. Otherwise, that would not be very fun for the party, but moments like this are why that sort of idea becomes so locked into the players' heads, and again, we'll talk about that sometime in the future. The remaining Wraith is also destroyed, so that's a small favor. Now, Percy's cloak, Cabal's Ruin, allows him to absorb a spell attack, which means he gets half damage instead, and he gains a number of charges equal to the level of the spell. Now, unfortunately, Cabal's Ruin only has 6 charges, so he only gets 6 instead of the full 9 he would get from a 9th level spell. Except, hey, actually, the cloak levels up. It gets a little bit longer, and now it actually does contain all 9 charges, which fill up immediately. And for a magic item that absorbs the damage from spells, getting hit by a 9th level spell is kind of the perfect justification to have that item level up. And this is where they discovered that these items have an ultimate form. Exalted. His item was not dormant. It was already awakened when he got it. And now it leveled up again. I personally wonder if Matt was always planning for the Vestiges to be able to level up twice total. I kind of don't think it was. I don't know this for sure, but I think what happened is that he wanted some of the Vestiges to awaken because they were dormant when they were buried in the tomb of the Raven Queen's champion, for example. It also meant that these items would level up as the players did, which basically means these players wouldn't level up so much during this storyline that they basically felt like these awesome magical items were going to be left behind in favor of other, more useful magic items, because that defeats the entire purpose of giving your players iconic magic items. You want them to stick with the players, so having them level up really helps solve that problem. However, I think Matt felt like these items that were currently being used when the players got their hands on them, like the Titanstone Knuckles, well, those items would not have been asleep. They wouldn't have been dormant, so they wouldn't have needed to be awakened. They were awakened when the players got them. But his players really, really still wanted their items to all awaken, because that seemed cool when it happened to the other players. Vex and Grog especially seem to keep trying to figure out how they can level up their Vestiges, because they saw it happen with Vax, they saw it happen with Scanlan. They want to know how they can do it. So I don't know if it was always in Matt's plan for these items to have a second level up when they become Exalted, or whether it was something he came up with when he was working on the campaign guide and putting Vestiges in there, or if he was seeing his players feel left out when they got items that had already been leveled up before they got their hands on them, and saw their other fellow players getting to level up their items, and so he thought, okay, well, I guess I have to add another level that the Vestige could eventually ascend to become Exalted. Either way, I think it's a really good design. I'm especially complimentary of this if it's that third option, if it's something that Matt chose to do because he realized he had set an expectation for his players that all their items would level up, which means each item would have to unlock another level and become even more badass to satisfy the fact that his players would otherwise feel like the storyline let them down. If this is not something that he had planned from the beginning of the Chroma Conclave storyline, like 12 or 13 months earlier, if this is something that he figured out based on the reaction by his players, then I think that is fantastic dungeon mastering. I know some of you may not totally agree. Some of you really like the idea that Matt sticks to his guns, that he prescribes something for the world, and that's what happens. I get it. But I also think that if you set up a scenario where magic items can level up and you tell some players, oh yeah, but yours won't, that's going to let the players down a little bit. And that's not their fault. I think the problem is the promise of the premise that you sort of implied. You said everyone was going to get a vestige because you have enough vestiges for everybody, and some of them are very specifically tailored for certain players. But then you said some of these vestiges are going to level up. So either you're saying everyone's are leveling up, which is what he ended up going with, or you're saying I chose some players to get to level up and not others. And that does not feel as good. And that's something that is very avoidable and very fixable, as we just saw. Again, maybe he had this plan the entire time, but I really kind of hope that he read the writing on the wall and he said, okay, I need to find some way to reward these players for having cool vestiges that will level up as they go along, even though these vestiges were already in use. I think he found a really good way to do that with all the vestiges, and good opportunities to level them up, as we'll talk about more as this campaign goes on. But I really praise him for realizing that this campaign would feel incomplete if it wasn't also possible for these items to continue to evolve. The party gets Allura back on her feet, they heal her, Raishan breaks free of her vines, though she's still invisible, and then she uses 2 legendary actions out of her total of 4 every round, to cast a spell. And she tries to cast Disintegration on Pike. Allura tries to counterspell, but she fails, and Pike fails her saving throw. She would be turned to dust, but her armor saves her with a burst of fire that brings her back to 1 hit point. Matt says he forgot she had that, so he was ready to kill Pike. He thought this was going to be the end of Pike. Without any chance of resurrection, no body, she was just going to be gone. The other players shout that you can't kill Ashley's character when she's not here, and Matt responds that this is what Raishan would do. She would go after the Cleric. And I'm sorry to everyone involved, I'm sorry to the entire cast of Critical Role, but I just have to ask, is this not something you all talked about before you agreed you would bring her into battle? This feels like something you need to have talked about before you decided to bring her into battle. I understand Matt's approach. I don't think I would do this at my own table, but I understand his point. If you're going to bring a party member into battle and treat her like any other character, that means you are treating the reality of the game as something that is more important than the logistics of the game. We talked about this a little bit with Scanlan's drug habit in the last episode, where he didn't successfully get a high until the session that Sam wasn't even there for. This is a way more extreme version, but it's kind of the same basic root problem. I say problem because of moments like this. It's not a problem in general, but for the players on Critical Role, it is really important to them to treat the reality of the game as sacred. Whatever happens in the game needs to be what actually would have happened. The players need to believe that what their characters are doing makes sense, that it is what they would naturally do in that scenario. For them, it makes no sense to go into battle without Pike. And from Matt's perspective, along those same lines, it makes no sense for the villain to not target the Cleric. That's what she would do. I personally feel like the problem with this approach is that it punishes players who aren't able to make it to the game for completely legitimate reasons. This is Ashley's job, and her life is in New York right now, kind of. It's complicated, because obviously she has a life here as well, but it's not her fault that she's not here for this. I made a whole video about the pros and cons of the different methods for handling characters of an absent player. You can check that video out up here. It's a complicated topic. There's not one right answer. It's going to depend on the circumstances. It's going to depend on the players. It's going to depend on your group. But for this party, they really, really want the continuity of the world to make sense. And if this is the approach that Matt and his players want to take, where there is functionally no difference between a player character whose player's at the table versus one who is being controlled by the GM and the other players, if the character is as susceptible to the reality of the world either way, if this helps them feel more immersed in the world, and doing anything different would basically break the reality of the game for them, well, hot take, that's fine. It's their game. So just because I would never want to do that at my tables, it's not wrong of them to do that. But the way the players react to this moment kind of makes it seem like they had no idea death was on the table for Pike. And that is something that I think is unacceptable. If you're okay with your player character potentially dying because the other players use them in battle, cool. But if you're not okay with that, or the other players aren't okay with another character dying because they're controlling them, they don't want that responsibility, the worst time for the group to have to litigate that is in the moment where your character is about to die. This absolutely needed to be a conversation back when they agreed to control Pike for the battle with Thordak back in episode 79, like 5 episodes ago. If they don't want Pike to die in combat in a session where the player is not present, well, I'm sorry guys, Matt gave you another solution a long time ago. Let her astrally project when she can make it to the game, and when she can't, she won't be there. It is insane to me that this conversation was not had prior to this moment, especially when it comes to this group, which normally I think really values strong communication. Anyway, this is not the last time you're going to hear me talk about this. This is not the most egregious example of this exact problem with this exact character. There's another one that drives me up the fucking wall in the late game of this campaign, but we will get there. Some of you may be able to figure out what it is from context. It is in the, I'll tell you, no spoilers, but it is in the last live show before the finale of Campaign 1. Like 5 or 6 episodes from the end of the campaign. And it drives me crazy. But we'll get there. During this fight that we're still talking about today, Raishan casts Cone of Cold, knocking out Scanlan, Pike, Allura, and Cleric. Kima doesn't see Allura and doesn't know that she's unconscious because they're on opposite sides of this pillar, so she heals Cleric and gets him back on his feet. That is a really good way that this dungeon is forcing interesting choices for the characters because they have to remember what information they have and what they don't. But it's also very conveniently a way to make sure the player character played by Patrick Rothfuss is able to get back on his feet before the wizard NPC, which, again, I think is just good etiquette. Let's make sure the players who are actually participating in the game are the priority rather than the NPCs, whenever possible. Keyleth prays to Allura, the goddess of nature, whose priest cast the original curse on Raishan, whose staff Keyleth currently wields. Allura's, not the priest's. Well, maybe the priest, probably not. No, definitely not, actually. But her prayer is literally just, I know you hate this bitch as much as I do. So, let's work together and help kill her. And again, talk about a major moment of character growth for Keyleth. Somebody who has been very reluctant to praise the gods, now prays to the gods, wink, praying to one of them for help in battle. Keyleth casts Firestorm on Raishan, and Matt says that this powerful spell is way higher level than Fog Cloud, so it just burns through that section of the Fog Cloud and makes it go away, which I think makes perfect sense. It's a very powerful spell. And Raishan burns through her first legendary resistance. Wink again.
Does, it being a staff of Malora do anything?
No, other than maybe, the mention of the name caused the sound of growling in the distance.
Why won't you all just stay down and die with dignity?
We don't do anything with dignity.
Scanlan's lifeless corpse has a pool of urine around it.
Vax rushes to Scanlan and gives him just 1 hit point just to get him up so he can take his turn rather than making death saving throws.
You are conscious.
Are you up?
Is this my urine or someone else's?
Someone peed on me while I was dead. Is this my urine or someone else's?
I don't know which is worse.
Vex heals Allura, so now everyone's back on their feet. Well, not Trinket or the dog, but everyone, human. Or humanoid, I guess. Percy shoots Raishan a few more times. One of the rolls is a natural 20, but Raishan uses her second legendary resistance to maintain concentration on greater invisibility. Matt also decides that you can't double the damage from Percy's cloak when he adds it to a natural 20, which I don't think is fair. Like a Paladin's smite would be doubled if you added it to a natural 20, even though you're also retroactively adding it after the hit, like you do with the damage from the cloak. So I guess I wouldn't be surprised if Matt changes his mind about this in the future for future rulings, because it is sort of in line with the Paladin ability. But also, in fairness, I understand his position. Percy already does a huge amount of damage. Percy's player is also completely fine with just the damage coming from the cloak as extra damage. It's not eligible for a critical amount of damage, so it's not a big deal. And I can also see the argument that Matt would not change his mind about this because he doesn't want you to drop all the dice from the cloak into a single attack just because it's a natural 20. That's not in the spirit of the magic item. That being said, it is kind of okay with the letter of the spirit item, and I would probably do that at my tables. There's nothing in the rules that says you can't double the damage from the cloak, so I would let you double the damage from the cloak. But this also might speak to the major difference between myself and Matt as Dungeon Masters. This is kind of like where we really differ. But we could talk about that another time, I'm sure. Raishan is getting tired of all these people getting back up after she knocks them unconscious, so it's time to start taking people off the board. She unloads 3 attacks into Scanlan, but thankfully he's able to use cutting words on the first attack with a very dumb dad joke, so it doesn't hit. But the next attack knocks him unconscious, and the one after that takes away 2 death saving throws, so he's only got 1 left. And unfortunately, now it's his turn. And no one gets a chance to act before that, so they can't heal him. And he rolls a 3 on his first and final death save. And he dies.
This time I died with a bad joke and piss all over me.
Also, once again, most of the player characters don't know this has happened yet, including Grog. From his perspective, he just heard the dragon move closer to him, so he attacks her, and uses up her last legendary resistance so she can stay invisible. At this point, Allura dispels Raishan's invisibility. For the first time in this fight, they can actually see the dragon. And it's right next to Percy. Pike tries to revivify Scanlan, and thanks to Matt's new rules, this means they don't have to do a whole ritual right here, but there is still a roll to try to bring him back. Now that's functionally what Matt has had them do basically every time they've tried to cast Revivify in this campaign, with one big exception, but he was always struggling to figure out how to handle Revivify. He knew he had this ritual for Raise Dead or Resurrection, but when they did Revivify, it seemed like he had to think about, how do I adjudicate this? And he always wound up having them do just a regular wisdom saving throw or wisdom check or something like that. So now he has codified the rules. If you do revivify, it's only one roll. But in this case, she rolls too low, and the spell fails. Now, this does not mean that he's dead forever. That's what it means when they fail one of the bigger rituals, but thanks to the rules that Matt has been revising over the past couple of weeks, this basically just means that they have to spend a resurrection spell that has a casting time longer than a minute. So either raise dead or resurrection, or true resurrection if that was on the table. And those are the kinds of spells that require that full ritual that we are all so familiar with at this point. But unfortunately, this means that Scanlan is out for the rest of the battle. He cannot be revivified, and they have to wait until they deal with Raishan before they can actually bring him back to life. Ultimately, I don't think this is the perfect solution. This is the best solution we ever got when Matt was running D&D. I think this is basically the final version of the rules, but it is still kind of imperfect. But we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a video next week, where we talk about Daggerheart's death system and the way that it iterates on the death system that Matt was trying to introduce to D&D, and how Daggerheart kind of patches the problems he was never able to fix. So keep your eyes out for that next week. Now, it's Keyleth's turn, and this is kind of an important turn.
It's kind of like a Hail Mary, you guys. Oh, Jesus, fuck. Alright, I am gonna cast my 1/8 level spell, and I'm going to attempt to feeble mind her.
She's used up all her legendary saves.
Exactly. Exactly.
Alrighty, and it is a intelligence saving throw.
Yes, which she's really good at. But we could get lucky.
Yep.
4 plus 4. Roll a 4. She has an intelligence modifier of 4 and is not one of her saving throws.
Shut up!
Her intelligence charisma become 1. Cannot cast spells. Cannot activate magical items.
She's just dumb.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my
Did that
god!
really happen? Did that work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's permanent, right?
No, it's
30
it's-
She can
days?
keep saving from it.
Yeah, at the end of every 30 days, she can repeat the
30
saving throw.
days.
She fell. She
fell off the chair!
Holy fuck!
That looks painful.
Oh, Marisha, what a beautiful moment!
What?
Get it!
We still got some problems.
As you reach out, you watch as the tendrils of nature's energy begin to spill out of the cracks in the vicinity.
And I
as-
just say, Melora, come on, girl. Come on, Melora.
You watch as Raishan kind of chuckles. One of the tendrils lashes out and wraps around the throat. And as they wrap and begin to strengthen around the neck, pouring into the cracks of the flesh where the disease currently holds her throat, her brow begins to sink, the jaw hangs open, and slobber begins to drip from her lower jaw. As Raishan, as opposed to speaking, now gets to a guttural.
Poetic justice, motherfucker.
Still got a dragon. Still got a dragon.
I love how nobody expected that to work. But she's right, this was the perfect time to cast the spell. And the fact that it worked is obviously such beautiful poetry. Of course, if there's a villain who has really wronged a specific player character, you would love for that player character to get the finishing blow on that villain, but there's no guarantee of that in D&D. As cathartic as it would be for Keyleth to kill Raishan, there are lots of other heroes on the field, so the odds are just as good that it could be any one of them. Actually, better in some cases, because Keyleth's biggest strength is doing damage to lots of opponents, whereas there are other members of the team who are a lot better at attacking a single individual and doing just buckets of damage. But thanks to the casting of this spell, Keyleth got to eradicate the thing that mattered the most to Raishan: her mind. Back in episode 70, she talked about how her body was decaying and her mind was still as sharp as ever, but it was trapped in this failing body. She's frequently talked about how much smarter and more important she is than all the other player characters, or all the other humans in general. When she was listing off the indignities she suffered at the hands of Thordak, the reason she cited for why none of that should have happened to her is because she was the evil mastermind behind this whole Chroma Conclave plot. She prided herself on always being able to tell when someone was lying. She thought she was the smartest person in the room, and for most of this campaign, that was absolutely true. But it's not true anymore. In this moment, Keyleth eradicated Raishan's entire identity. Yes, there's still an ancient green dragon in front of them, and that is still going to be a big problem. But the diseased deceiver is no more. At least for the next 30 days. And you hope that they're going to be able to solve this problem before the 30 days runs out.
All these spells. Cannot use them now.
Yay.
That's right, Matt. That's right.
But of course, now they're facing a rabid ancient green dragon, which is still better than the 17th level spellcaster green dragon they've been fighting so far, but it's, you know, not as good as fighting like a 17th level spellcaster human who would just become like a guy. So this ancient green dragon attacks the nearest foe, Percy, and knocks him unconscious. And because he was standing on the wall, thanks to his boots of spider climb, he falls to the ground and immediately loses death save the moment he hits the ground.
Can be Shorthalt and Dorolo in heaven. Just
Oh, it's so cute that you think either of us are going.
And with the dragon's last attack, she hits Percy, taking away his last 2 death saving throws and killing him. And Matt describes how Percy's entrails are scattered across the dungeon floor. It's brutal, it's visceral, it is absolutely in character for the description of an attack from this mindless, savage beast they're facing. Grog unloads a few more attacks into the dragon, and then Cleric, who has not hit anything since his first attack against the Wraith, he's just been fruitlessly trying to attack Raishan and failing, but finally lands a hit on this ancient green dragon.
28.
28 points of damage?
28.
Whack.
She dies suddenly. A cardiac arrest.
At a max hit points of 520, how do you want to do this? Literally had 7 hit points left.
Almost going home with a
As far as my math goes, yeah.
level 7.
I can't fucking believe that happened.
Just like leveled up to like,
So, how do you want to do this?
oh my god.
The feral beast there, tearing the innards out of Percy on the ground, Grog slamming into it, just seemingly just bashing against the world, watching everyone drop around you like flies, your one hammer in hand.
What I would like to do is step over to like be over his body, you know, and it's like no further, and as the dragon is coming in, like just trying to mindlessly claw at this poor destroyed corpse, you know, and I like to think of the anime slow-mo strike where like the hammer comes back and it slows down, and then when it connects you get like the big starburst. Wow, okay.
As the hammer arcs downward, slams into the snout of Raishan just as the head turns up. The eyes that were once reptilian and intelligent are now just filled with bloodshot rage and feral intensity. The jaw is attempting to snap up and catch the blade. However, you're too fast. Your old adventuring reflex kicking in. As the glowing hammer head comes down onto the snout, the divine energy blasts forward, and you watch as the dragon's face explodes, inverting inward, the front of the skull being blown backward, and you guys watch as this flash of light fills the entirety of this necrotic space. This one plume of radiant smoke kind of, and left behind you see Cleric standing there holding the rod, the actual head of the hammer now dismissed as part of the burst of radiant energy, and there the smoking ruin of the throat, headless, of Raishan, the deceased deceiver, collapsing to the ground unmoving. We're gonna take a quick break.
I love the speed ramping sound effect so much. It's one of my favorite examples of Matt taking something that the player describes and amplifying it as part of his own description. He does that every time he gives someone the how do you want to do this. It's kind of the format of it. Give me a prompt, I'll turn it into this really cool scene. And there have been some truly sensational death scenes. I don't think this is my favorite death scene ever. But I don't know, I love the ramp up from slow motion into the final hit. Maybe because it's cinematic, and I tend to be very cinematic in my own games, literally using the language of filmmaking, far more so than Matt usually does. Matt's approach is typically a little bit more inspired by audiobooks. He might talk about what we're seeing, but he doesn't talk about like lenses or camera movements or things like that, with the exception of the scrying spell. So it almost feels like getting to see him flex different muscles. Again, probably not my favorite kill of all time, but in terms of the actual description and how much it elevated the prompt, this is on that list. It's pretty high on the list, actually. Also, since Cleric was only level 7, he clearly just got so much XP. I have to imagine that for the next hour, his XP bar is just going to keep loading in the corner, just filling itself up with all the XP he just got for the final blow of this ancient green dragon. At this point, they go to break, and when they return, Sam and Taliesin are not at the table because their characters are dead. We've talked about this before, but removing the players from the table is obviously a dramatic flourish for an actual play show, but it also does help the players feel the absence of those characters. And also has a nice benefit of preventing metagaming, because the player behind that character can't contribute to any efforts to bring them back to life. But because the battlefield was so segmented, most of the characters don't know who's alive or not yet. They roll Revivify on Percy, it barely works, but he's back up with 1 hit point. But then the party gradually discovers Scanlan's fate.
and you turn the corner, Grog, and you see Vax holding the still body of Scanlan just dangling out of his arms.
No. No. No! Fix him! Fix him!
Starts a rocket. You're a child.
Will somebody do something?
We have to take him home.
We have to get him out of here.
Well, we got all these people with magic. You've all got magic spells. You just brought him back. Fix him!
Pike looks at Kima. Can you do anything?
This is beyond any of my capabilities. I have a certain skill set, and it's not this kind of skill set. I'm sorry.
Vax, the Raven Queen. You can talk to her, right? Vax?
I mean, what do we need? Do we need, like...
Okay, we have to get him out of here because this place sucks.
We need to take him somewhere. With a temple. And we need to find his daughter.
Allura tries to teleport them all out of here, but it doesn't work. Matt rolls a die behind the screen, and so Allura casts the spell and nothing happens. The magic Raishan mentioned is blocking them. I definitely want to make a video in the future about whether or not it should be easy to get back out of a dungeon. Like, should you just hand wave it away and say, you leave? Do you run them through the dungeon in reverse? It's really a question of verisimilitude versus dramatic pacing and how they combat each other in this situation, and making sure that if you do put an emphasis on the players getting back out of a dungeon, there's some dramatic question behind whether or not they can make it. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time. But in this case, there's very much a dramatic question. Can we get out and get Scanlan somewhere safe and bring him back to life is a big question. And they could just cast the spell here, bring him back to life here, but since the magic is clearly kind of weird here, they're not sure whether or not that's worth the risk. And of course, they've also come to the conclusion that they need Scanlan's daughter to have the best chance of bringing him back to life. So they need to get to her, and obviously she's not here. They quickly loot the dungeon, but just with the goal of finding something that might be helpful for their goal of bringing Scanlan back to life. They're not collecting samples from the dragons right now. In fact, Keyleth plants her staff in Raishan. Now, she has been hoping for some sort of acknowledgement that she's wielding a staff of Melora and attacking a dragon who was cursed by a priest of Melora. Some sort of damage bonus or a penalty to Raishan's saves against her spells or something. But Matt doesn't really do that kind of thing, at least not when it comes to actually being in combat, especially not at this point in the campaign. But in this moment, Matt finally gives her what she's looking for. Some recognition that Melora would have quite a lot of animosity towards Raishan, and that Keyleth can be that vessel for her to get her vengeance. So as she plants her staff, we see the curse that infected Raishan's body instantly spread and consume her entire body at once. And that's a really great compromise for this situation. Also, it obviously makes sense that they wouldn't collect samples from the diseased deceiver. No one's going to want that blood or scales or stuff like that. Also, Cleric goes near a pillar in the middle of the lab, and his body just seizes up, and they have to dispel magic on him just so he can move again. There are 2 pillars in this lab, and that would have been a perfect environmental hazard for the middle of the fight, but because the dragon didn't come into the lab, none of the players really got anywhere near those pillars, so it's kind of a shame, but it's a cool bit of design. I should use something like that for my own campaign, but just maybe moving it somewhere where the players are more likely to interact with it. They burn the lab as they leave, and they fly back over the ravine full of corpses, and as they approach the first level of the dungeon, they encounter the flame skulls again. But now they know not to clump up. They don't even roll initiative. Matt doesn't even change the music. They just use their ranged attacks to deal with the skulls before they can get too close. However, Cleric actually closes the distance with the last couple of skulls and gets hit with scorching rays, but then he can get in range of the skulls and smite them. But he's also been in a bit of a daze ever since Percy and Scanlan died, fruitlessly dumping lay on hands into Percy's corpse before they brought him back to life. So he's approaching these skulls without regard for his own safety, because he's not all here. This isn't just Patrick trying to do something cool because he sat out so much of the fight or because he has the skills to do this. This is also him role-playing Cleric's grief and frustration and fatigue. Matt very briefly describes how they leave the dungeon, they grab the immovable rods, and then once they're outside, Allura casts Teleportation Circle. She doesn't have another teleport spell, but she can do Teleportation Circle at least back to their keep in Amon. They can't get to Whitestone that way, but they can get to Amon that way. Matt rolls a die behind the screen, and Allura goes through the circle. But then Kima says, the circle doesn't normally look like that. But then she follows Allura through. The players wonder what that means. They roll Arcana to try to figure out what is going on, and they learn that the circle is flickering a little bit, like the spell she tried in the basement. They don't know what that means, but that's all the information they have to go on. Grog says that if we need those two to bring Scanlan back, we have to follow them. But if we don't follow them, you had, quote, better be right that we don't need them. But the players don't know what to do. They don't need Allura and Kima for the resurrection spell, but they sure would like to know where they went. But then they also realize if the circle's only open for 6 seconds, which it is, and they didn't follow, which they didn't, they missed their window anyway. So as they debate this, the circle closes, and now they have no idea where Allura and Kima are. The party starts heading for the beach so they can find a healthy tree so Keyleth can take them through it, because that's where all the healthy trees are, and also, hopefully it's far enough away from the center of the island that their magic won't be affected in any way as they try to teleport out of here. But as they travel, Keyleth sits on the carpet and scries on Allura and Kima, and she sees them in the middle of the ocean. She doesn't know how far away they are, but they're alive, they're treading water somewhere, and they are together. But we know Allura's out of teleport spells. She can do a teleportation circle if they can find a solid object, but there's nothing like that here. The players have no idea how to find them, and they have to prioritize Scanlan. So very reluctantly, Keyleth agrees that this means they have to leave the island and try to come back for them, rather than staying and organizing a search party, which is what she would normally insist that they do. When they get to the beach, Keyleth scans the horizon to see if she can see them, just any fruitless attempt to look around, see if she maybe can get a glimpse of them, and she rolls a natural 20 for a total of 31. So she actually does see, very faintly on the horizon, something. And Vex takes that as a green light. She flies off to go get them. When she gets to them, because yes, this is Kima and Allura, she discovers they were swimming in the wrong direction, and Kima was not going to be able to keep swimming for long thanks to her armor, but they are still alive. They grab onto the broom and start flying back together, but they were pretty far away. So Percy says that after 10 minutes, he would fly out that direction with the carpet. And so eventually, as the broom gets closer to the island and the carpet is on its way to meet them, Allura casts Dimension Door to bring her and Kima to the carpet so they can stop holding onto the broom for dear life. And just breathe. They all reunite at the beach, and Allura says this is probably why so many people came to investigate this place and never returned. The magic kept them here, or sent them astray. But now they're all able to travel through a tree back to Whitestone, since they are no longer limited to where they have a teleportation circle they can travel to. They can go back to their new home, basically. Back in Whitestone, Keyleth scries on Kaylee and sees her in a tavern in the city of Kymel. Nobody in the party has any teleportation magic left. They've never been to Kymel, so they can't travel through a tree there. So Vex takes the Gatestone and rushes to Gilmore to try to figure out how he can get her to Kymel. He doesn't have a circle there, and he's not high enough level to have just teleports, but he sees in her face how desperate she is, and so he takes Vex somewhere else where he can actually find the answer for her. And Matt cuts away to the other players who are preparing Scanlan's body in the temple. But Grog does not go inside. He's just sitting on the steps. He says he can't go inside and doesn't really know why, but he says, I mean, it's me. Like, that's all the explanation you need for why he can't confront seeing Scanlan's dead body. It's fascinating because when Percy died, Grog was the animating force that kept the group moving and kept them from mourning prematurely and succumbing to despair. But this time it's different. This time it's Scanlan. But as we said earlier, Keyleth has come a long way in her character arc in a very short amount of time, and she's starting to talk like a leader. And so she talks to Grog and convinces him that he's the best member of the party to try to persuade Scanlan's soul to return, especially if Kaylee can't make it. And so with her help, he enters the temple. Matt asks the players what they're doing because he doesn't seem to understand. This is a very strange moment because it's kind of obvious. They're putting together a resurrection ritual for Scanlan. They took him to the temple, they sent Vex to go get Kaylee, they talked to Grog into going into the temple and talking to Scanlan. They're preparing for the ritual. The only reason we're not moving forward with that storyline is we haven't cut back yet to Vex and Gilmore, so the ritual can't happen right now. They clarify, we're making a ritual, we're getting ready for it, but I'm just so confused where they lost Matt. But you know what, in fairness, it's 11 o'clock at night. Maybe that's why Matt was a bit separated from what the rest of the players were doing. Once he understands that they're trying to find a way to perform the ritual right away, he's able to help resolve what they're trying to do. Gilmore takes Vex to Eskel Rindarian, who has teleportation magic and can take them to Kymel, but he can't bring them back today. He can only do it once per day, so she has to pay for their rooms for the night, and then they can come back to Whitestone in the morning. Eskel teleports himself and Vex to Kymel, which Matt describes as the seedy Reno of this world. If you're from Reno, I don't mean any offense, that's Matt's analogy. And Matt describes how they actually see a goblin and a gnoll walking among the people in this city. So Matt is starting to imply that some of the monsters of this party has fought many times might not all be as foundationally evil as you might imagine. They can coexist in society. At the very least, as long as that society is somewhere where they're accepted. Someplace like Reno. Again, no offense towards Reno. But we're actually going to see this idea get fleshed out a lot more in the second campaign, when we start to see that some of these creatures are capable of a lot more nuance than they've been presented in the campaign thus far. They find Kaylee, and Vex is not gentle with her. She's desperate and upset. She wants to bring her friend back to life, understandably. So when Kaylee seems dismissive of Vex's arrival, Vex literally slaps her just to get her to be serious. But when she says that Scanlan has died, and that Kaylee can help save him, it doesn't even seem like Kaylee understands what she's being asked to do. Just like Matt, actually. She seems dismissive of this whole idea. but Laura plays her character very honestly, and we get a truly beautiful moment.
Look, I know a little bit about having a father who wasn't around, right? Take it from me. It's not worth it. It's not worth harboring this hatred in your heart. If you can find it in yourself to forgive him, you'll live a much happier life.
She rolls a 25, and Kaylee still doesn't really understand what's going on. The party is not really doing a great job communicating what they are trying to do, so Kaylee doesn't know how she can help, but she says at the very least she would like to see his body before he's buried. Vex just asks that you try to help when you get there, however you can. She asks Kaylee to hold this stone and focus on it for about a minute, and eventually Kaylee vanishes. But at this point, it's almost 11:30, so they call the game for the night. But unfortunately, Sam isn't going to be present for that next game. In fact, that might have been a factor in why they were so intently trying to resurrect Scanlan right away. Yes, these player characters always worry that the longer they wait, the harder it will be to resurrect someone. I don't know if that's because the players don't know they actually have 10 days to cast the ritual, like they literally don't know the spell, or because Matt keeps changing the resurrection rules and now they worry time might be a factor more so than in rules as written, or if they're just playing their characters authentically. After all, they've seen spells like Revivify fail to succeed if it's been more than a minute, so it stands to reason that time might always be a factor. That's something the player characters could genuinely believe, whether or not the players actually know it or not. But also, they might have been trying so hard to perform the ritual in this episode because Sam wasn't going to be here for the next session, and they might have wanted to finish it tonight. But eventually they were just getting too tired, they had to call it a night. In hindsight, maybe it would have been better to just wrap up the game when they got back to Whitestone, and I think if Matt had realized that the players were trying to perform a ritual right now, I don't know why he didn't realize that, but if he had, maybe he would have done that right away, just ended the game when they got to Whitestone. But once again, hindsight is 20/20. Actually, let's be honest, at best, hindsight is 20/20. Sometimes you don't even get that lucky. So next week we're going to discuss episode 84, Loose Ends. And that's really the perfect name for what's coming next, because not only do they have a resurrection ritual to perform, and the result of that is going to make a big difference about what the rest of the session looks like, but also, even if that goes well, they don't have an obvious next mission in front of them. But they have lots of little tasks they've been understandably putting off for a while now. So part of the question of the next episode isn't just whether or not they'll be able to revive Scanlan, but also, even if they do manage to do that, what comes next? However, I just realized we haven't confirmed what Raishan's evil plan actually was. I was holding off on clarifying it until after we finished this episode. She wanted to get rid of this curse, and she was very close to doing so, but we don't actually know how she planned to do that. It was never confirmed in any of these episodes. The party speculated that she wanted to put her brain into Thordak's rotting body and live forever that way, and they were very close to the right answer. She wanted to become a Draco Lich, a Dragon Lich. So she would have been an undead and basically unkillable ancient green dragon. Or maybe she still would have snagged Thordak's body. It's a little bit bigger, so she could have moved her mind into that body and still been a Draco Lich. But either way, that was her plan, to live forever. Speaking of evil plans, hey Odwick.
What's up?
Well, as you can see, I am following the terms of your curse. Unlike Raishan, I'm not trying to break the curse on me. I did make weekly Demystified videos. I'm continuing to do so. I have another Demystified video coming next week.
I can see that.
And so, in the spirit of good faith, maybe you could let me know what happened to Future Geek Mike, the version of me from the future that was trying to stop me from making videos. Could we figure out what happened with that?
Why do you want to know that?
Well, look, I'm going to level with you. If that's how I die, coming back to the future and being killed by an algorithm
Don't worry, I didn't kill him.
Okay, but could you tell me where he is? Like, what happened to him?
You don't need to talk to him.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, look, it would be nice to know.
He's gone, all right? He's somewhere you'll never find him. He's somewhere nobody is ever going to look. It doesn't matter what you do, you'll never see him again. So just drop it, all right?
Okay.
Your job, your only job, is to focus on your videos. Make the videos I want you to make, the videos your audience comes to you for. You do not need to talk to your future self. You don't need to think about your future self in order to make videos. So I don't want to hear you ask about him again. All right?
Got it.
Thank you. Well, keep up the good work. I'll see you soon.
Okay, well, kind come back soon for a new video, I guess. Got another one coming out tomorrow. Another few videos next week as well. Making another Daggerheart video next week and another Demystified video talking about episode 84. Loose ends, talking about all the unresolved plot threads that I haven't figured out how to do anything about. But in the show, the unresolved plot thread's going to come together in the show, the episode of Critical Role. So it's going to be a good episode. If you should watch it. If you missed it, I made a video talking about designing the government for my new campaign setting. The video came out really well, and I remember at the end of the last Demystified video, I was like, oh, I'm going to talk about politics. That's what I meant. I remember I put a comment on screen. I was not going to actually answer that comment. It's a bad faith question. But what I did do is talk about politics in the context of this video about making a government for my actual campaign setting. So if you haven't watched that video, check it out. It's pretty good. Until next time, play fair. Someone should. And have fun.